Acting KwaZulu-Natal Premier Nomagugu Simelane has announced changes to the executive. Sipho Nkosi is the new Public Works and Human Settlements MEC, while Ntuthuko Mahlaba has moved to the sport portfolio following last month's resignation of Amanda Bani Mapena. Political analyst Dr. Fikile Vilakazi joins us now for more on this. A very good evening to you, ma'am. Good to have your time. So, how unprecedented is it for such a change to be announced by an acting premier, as I understand it, while the actual premier is out abroad?
Good evening, Tembegile, and to viewers at home. An acting premier does have a mandate, politically speaking, to make decisions that a premier would have made if they were present, for example. Because when you are acting, you're actually given the same responsibilities that a premier would under normal circumstances, also execute. So that is my understanding of how it works.
Could it not wait?
Of course, it could have. It could have, in the context of the issues, Tembegile, that are happening in the province. Around relationships just within the African National Congress itself, but also relationships within the executive of the province. We know that these resignations were also informed by relationships that are just not working. There's issues of power contestations there. Not just about the positions that were being refilled today, but also the relationships just within the executive itself and members of the ANC. The appointment of the premier, Umama Unomusa Dube as the first female candidate, brought its own challenges in that issues of insubordination are glaringly clear to the public and to those of us who are watching from a distance and in the province. So it could have waited, but there are also those inside political issues that perhaps one then takes advantage of moments like this to say, I would also want to be able to be seen to executing my own power and my own influence in these kinds of decisions.
So that's where I was going, because the Premier Nomusa Dube is seen by some people as someone who was always going to be a placeholder, because the ANC very often likes its chairperson to be premier. It couldn't in KwaZulu-Natal because Siboniso Duma, at the time we're told, simply did not have the experience to basically come in at the level of premier. Given the perception that often the premier has been undermined publicly or even had to go everywhere with Duma, who serves as an MEC in the executive but is also her senior in the ANC, how much does this then undermine her position when she does return?
The premier has always been undermined. This is one of the things that I indicated, and many of us as analysts have been saying when she was appointed, to say, can the ANC please not tokenize this position, to say we now have the first premier in the province who is a woman? Can she be given that ability to lead? And I think we've seen it in a number of cases in the conversations with Amakosi. We've seen it in certain instances of public engagement from the office of the executive. The contestation and the tension that exists there between Uchepesin and the premier, as you allude to, that is something that we can see that is obvious. So in a way, she was put in there as a token, but she's a very, very strong leader. She has been able to demonstrate a capability to lead beyond those struggles, beyond those tensions. She stood up, in my view, her ground, and she continues to do that. And this act of appointing people in her absence, if it is not a mandate coming from her, is one of those dances, right? And that parade of saying we are capable of doing this thing without you, because everybody wants to be seen, to be playing this role. And we know that power games are part of the ANC internally. Everybody wants this position of being a premier. Everybody wants this position because it's actually a succession to be able to serve at national level, and that is how things work within the ANC. And everybody wants to have that particular stake. And in the process, then they've always be seen to be undermining the premier. I think it's something that is there. We can't deny it's on the public domain and it's happening.
You speak of her being a good leader, but is she really leading at this point? Or is she more of a ceremonial appointment who basically just has to enforce what is coming from the provincial executive of the ANC?
As we are saying here, Tembegile, and to fellow South Africans, she is trying very, very hard to lead, but we know that the power of influence comes from underneath, where she's sitting. It's coming from the influence of her executive, who are also putting their weight and pulling their weight to say that we put you here, so you're going to do what we tell you to do. And I think these are some of the words that Chairperson Usboniso Duma said just after the elections at the electoral conference of the province, that we are in charge. So that kind of a thing is glaring, that leaders like Umama Nomusa Dube and premiers generally and presidents sometimes get to experience this kind of tokenization where they are led from the bottom. And it's a challenge generally about women leadership and feminist leadership in politics, particularly within the ranks of the African National Congress. We've seen how political leaders who are women have been treated in these ways. They're given spaces, they're given a chair, but they don't actually lead from that place. Somebody else leads, and they just become the shining front to say that we have a woman that is leading. I think in the context of Mama Onomusa Dube, sadly, that is what is happening. So she's leading in that way. She's leading in that context of saying someone else is telling you what to do most of the time, and it is being done.
So the aim, according to the acting Premier Simelane today, in this reshuffle of the executive is basically to show a clear commitment to the acceleration of service delivery. Does that, or is that reflected in the changes, especially when you consider that just recently the ANC's national office had to go down to KZN at higher level, or at a higher level to that of the president, to try and deal with the issues in the province, because there is clearly discontent even in areas such as eThekwini, where people are saying the metro is falling apart.
KwaZulu-Natal has just emerged from a very big problem of food security in schools, right? Where children have been given rotten food. The Premier jumped in there to bring in the investigation and so on. But if you are bringing in someone like Mahlaba, Mahlaba, you are shifting basically from one position to the other, and you are saying you want to accelerate service delivery. You are actually saying to the people of KwaZulu-Natal, it's an insult, let me put it like that. Because the contestations that people have around the name, Mahlaba, his mayorship in Newcastle. People were really not happy even about the scandals around his name in terms of the violences that are sitting in his name. Yes, in some cases, the cases where the charges were dropped, but he actually was charged for assault, right? And was fined about 20,000 rand if my memory serves me well. So he carries that, and you are saying you have to not even wait for the Premier and just reshuffle a person of that nature into a very, very strategic position of sports, arts and culture. That has got a lot but a very important role in terms of building social cohesion. And recently we know there are issues here where people are tapping into the world of sports. I've heard from the sideline that Ntuthuko Zuma is entering the space of sports in terms of, looking at it as a lucrative market. So who knows, right? So there are those things, and I think it's worrying to then say, you could not even have waited for the Premier to come to make these kinds of changes because you are accelerating service delivery. But you're not necessarily changing the faces and the bodies that people have been saying we do not need this kind of a person to lead us because of the manner of their character in terms of their political leadership. So I don't think it has got anything to do with service delivery. Remember, Mahlaba was part of the Taliban during the election conference. Usboniso Duma was also in that faction of the Taliban, which is a faction that has been supporting the former President Jacob Zuma. It takes us back to that spiraling and that cycle to say whatever wind of opportunity that is found, the factions are going to play themselves. And Unomusa Dube, the Honorable Premier, is seen, of course, to be in the faction of President incumbent Cyril Ramaphosa. So anything that will enable these factions to take over power, any moment an opportunity will be utilized. And I think in this particular instance, probably that is what is playing itself. And all of this is happening within that politic. It's really about retaining certain people within strategic positions. It has got nothing to do with South African citizens, KZN citizens in particular in this context. The province is falling apart. It's not just about giving rotten food to our children. It is about also the fact that Mahlaba comes from housing. And we just emerged from the floods. What has he done in the last 9 months? He was appointed in 9 months to say, can you build temporary shelters for people, for survivors of the floods? Nothing much has been done in that regard. We know that. And that has been linked to also the transportation project. Say, let us rebuild bridges, let us rebuild pipes and dams that were destroyed by the floods. We can't actually look into the program of the 9 months and say, this is what Mahlaba has done, and we are shifting him to sports and culture. What is it that is going to do differently there? So those are the kinds of things that I think the ANC leadership in government is failing to really look seriously into, from a place of accountability and a place of reality, to say service delivery for South Africans requires really different bodies at this point in time. You cannot be tossing and turning leaders whose character has been tainted and hope to still convince citizens that they can deliver services when they haven't done that. It's just a continuation of deepening troubles that we have been sitting with in terms of corruption, in terms of scandals, and in terms of service delivery. And I don't think it's going to change anything. Unfortunately, it's just going to deepen distance for the ANC towards the 2024 elections. And of course, amongst the women of South Africa, the feminists of South Africa, the tokenism that we are watching happening about the Premier, the disrespect, is also something that is probably going to compromise the women voter towards the ANC in the coming elections.
Dr. Fikile Vilakazi, good to speak to you. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Fikile Vilakazi speaking to us about the executive changes made in KZN today.